I think that critical media literacy education is a really vital component of this work and also just of education generally. I work in my day job as a preschool teacher, and so I am most of the time teaching children how to read, but more generally teaching children how to kind of take in the world around them. And that's like a really vital skill that a lot of people in the world lack, and how to take in the world critically and not just take everything for granted, not taking these like kind of destructive mainstream narratives for granted. It's a really important part of teaching, and especially in early education, these are skills that nobody's really focusing on at this point, but that ground children for the rest of their lives and will decide how they interpret the news and how they interpret the world around them. So also just in my work with Weave News, I think that critical media literacy is something we're constantly focusing on and grappling with, because honestly, most people don't have these skills, and they are interpreting the news however they want to interpret the news, and they are taking things at face value, and they're not considering the different perspectives and the ways that the stories, the way that the story is told changes the outcome for everybody on the ground. And so being able to kind of read between the lines and understand what perspective is being taken, but also what perspectives are being left out, are a really vital part of education that's just not, it's not even being focused on right now, whether it's on the pre-K level that I teach or whether it's high school or college. These are not skills that are easily accessible, but they should be. I think that without critical media literacy, it's almost impossible to hold power to account, because if you're just taking things at face value all the time, you're not questioning things. You're just accepting the bad things for what they are, and you're accepting these like destructive corporate messages that we get from major news outlets, rather than challenging them and standing up for yourself and standing up for other voiceless people. I think that holding power to account is paramount to this work. Within Weave News, we are constantly trying to challenge these narratives by empowering voiceless people and empowering ordinary people to tell their own stories. And so we lean a lot into citizen journalism, and through citizen journalism, our contributors and everyone on the staff at Weave News is able to develop these skills, and it's an ongoing learning process, right? There's not really a finish line. We're constantly learning how to be critical and how to challenge these narratives, because the narratives are changing as quickly as anything else, and the news changes on a daily basis. But holding power to account in these new spaces is one of the only tools we have to do so. And if we're not supporting our free press and supporting independent media, we're not challenging power. And then power is left to do whatever it wants to do. And it's left to make the world a more difficult place for us to live in. And that's just not something people should be willing to accept. I think that the free press can be an inspiration for people to engage in civic engagement. I think that without a free press, without independent journalism, and without people with these critical skills who are trying to not only use the skills themselves, but to kind of spread the skills and get more people on board with the message of critical media literacy, like I said before, you're just not challenging power. And so especially during an election year, we need to be supporting those forces, because if we begin to take them for granted, we can lose them completely. And without a free press, nobody's talking about the other side of the story. You're only hearing the side of the story that the corporate media wants you to hear. And so it's really vital that, especially during these like hectic times, particularly the last few election cycles, when we've had like such a rise of disinformation and such a rise of people not being able to tell their own stories, and like the destruction of the local news and things like that. If you're not actively engaging with the news and with your community, you're just letting things continue to be awful and to be the way they are. And I think that there's a lot to be said for like good storytelling, and being able to engage with your own community through the free press and through independent media. If you're only interacting with these large organizations that are funded in ways that you don't understand, by sources that you don't know about, you don't even know what the message is or who it's coming from. You're just accepting it for what it is. And so in order to be like a responsible citizen in a democratic space, you have to be engaged. And the free press is the one tool we have to do that. And it's the one way in which we get to interact and we get to speak up. I think the election year, every time, but particularly this time, feels scary to approach, because we don't know what the change is going to be, if there will be a change. And in either scenario, we're not necessarily like the winners, right? Both parties are kind of supported by this imperial idea of the United States that kind of puts it as a superpower and just takes for granted that things in the United States are secure and stable. But that's not always the case. We saw with like the January 6th riots, the insurrection, that things here are not so stable. And I think in the last few years, it's become really evident. And so coming up on the election, it's like kind of a scary moment for the United States, because it could go either way, and either way it's not necessarily the best outcome, or an outcome that supports the people living on the ground here and elsewhere. Like, we see the United States impact all over the world. It's not just about domestic issues, it's about how we affect the people in Palestine and how we're affecting the people in Hong Kong and places like this. And all these issues going on around the world, they're deeply connected and they're rooted in the same problems. And at Weave News, that's something we grapple with a lot, we talk about a lot, is that these local issues are also global issues, and these global issues are also local issues, and they're all kind of founded in the same structural problems. And if you are not paying attention to your local context, you're missing a huge part of the story. And if you're not paying attention to the global context and these events happening elsewhere, you're not getting the whole story. And the corporate media will often not show you those things. And so storytelling is really important from like a personal role. What you have to say matters. And so going up to the election, I mean, there's like a number of things I'm really concerned about. I'm really concerned about domestically, like student debt. That's an issue that's really personal to me and is bearing really heavily on my conscience. I'm thinking about women's rights and LGBTQ rights. I'm also thinking about environmental rights, and how we have access to the public spaces around us and how those spaces are limited from place to place. I mean, just even like coming here to Philadelphia, I realized how little of this space was committed to public use. Like, I've struggled to find parks, I've struggled to find benches to sit on and that sort of thing. And those things matter. It matters what is in your community. And those things seem disconnected from the presidential election, but they're not. They're deeply rooted in the same problems. And so I just think it's really difficult to boil down the issues to one issue when they're so deeply enmeshed in each other. But like I said, like leading up to the election, it's a frightening time, but I think it reinforces the need for a free press and for independent media, especially critical media literacy education. And I think that starts at like every level. You know, it starts with kids learning to read. It starts with kids developing these values and ideas early in their life so that they can carry them through their life and develop those skills early on so that we're creating responsible citizens who are able to process the world around them in a way that makes more sense. I think that a lot of the problem right now is that like news comes at us from every angle and it's saying all these things and we don't know how to sort it out. And critical media literacy skills allow you to do that. And so developing them early is really essential. And especially during election years and things like that, those skills are really vital to kind of maintaining our communities as safe spaces where we can live and prosper.